You need to control that child. The words shattered the peaceful hum of the community park like a thrown brick through stained glass. I turned toward the voice, dread already coiling in my stomach. There she stood, Patricia Harrington, HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates, arms crossed, lips pinched, and eyes hard behind her oversized designer sunglasses. She towered over my daughter Mia, who sat quietly in her wheelchair, shoulders hunched, fingers trembling as she tried to scoop up the remains of her dropped ice cream cone. The melting vanilla formed a small splatter on the sun-warmed concrete, a stain that should have been as insignificant as a leaf on the sidewalk. But to Patricia, it was a declaration of war. "I'm sorry," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible, cheeks flushing red as tears welled in her pale blue eyes. At only 7 years old, living with muscular dystrophy, my daughter already carried a heavier burden than most. Her every day was a battle against limbs that didn't obey, lungs that tired too fast, and a world that didn't always accommodate difference. Now, on what was supposed to be a relaxing afternoon, she faced the scorn of a woman whose authority had long gone unchecked. Patricia's mouth twisted in dramatic disgust as she gestured toward the tiny mess. "This is exactly why I opposed removing the accessibility restrictions in our community bylaws. Now we have situations like this, unsupervised children creating hazards in our shared spaces." I dropped the water bottle I'd been filling and rushed toward them, anger building with each step. "She's not unsupervised," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice even, though every part of me wanted to scream. I was 20 feet away, and she dropped her ice cream. It happens. Children spill things. "Not in Meadowbrook Estates, it doesn't," Patricia sniffed, not even flinching as she squared her shoulders. Her blonde bob didn't move an inch, perfectly sprayed into immobility. "We have standards here, Mr. Reed." This wasn't the first time we'd clashed. Since Mia and I moved into Meadowbrook a month ago, this woman had been relentless. First, it was the ramp I installed so Mia could enter our home, called it unsightly and a violation of neighborhood aesthetics. Then, she filed a formal notice about my adapted van being parked in the driveway instead of the garage, claiming it ruined the uniform appearance of the block. And now, here she was, publicly berating a child for dropping a scoop of ice cream. Patricia's obsession with control and appearance masked something darker, something crueler, and my daughter was her latest target. Around us, other parents had stopped mid-conversation, some turning to watch, others pretending not to notice. Their expressions were a mix of discomfort, curiosity, and the silent fear of drawing Patricia's ire. No one stepped forward. I crouched beside Mia, wiping her tears with a napkin from my pocket. "It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen." Patricia clicked her tongue and tapped her manicured nails on the clipboard she always carried like a badge of office. "Not accidents, negligence," she snapped. "As HOA president, I'm responsible for maintaining community standards. That path was just power washed yesterday, at considerable expense to our homeowners." Mia's small hand found mine, squeezing with what little strength she had. Her touch anchored me. After losing my wife to cancer 2 years ago, it had been just the two of us, me and Mia, learning how to survive, how to build a new life from the pieces of the old one. Meadowbrook Estates was supposed to be our fresh start. The neighborhood brochures had promised tree-lined streets, excellent schools, and a family-friendly atmosphere. I used the last of Laura's life insurance to get us here, believing I was giving Mia a better future. But all I'd done was move her into the crosshairs of a power-hungry bully, with a grudge against anything that didn't fit her definition of perfection. "I'll clean it up," I said, keeping my voice calm as I pulled out more napkins. "See that you do," Patricia replied with a thin smile. "And consider this a verbal warning. The next incident will result in a citation and fine." She turned sharply on her heel, her designer stilettos clacking against the concrete. As she walked away, I heard her mutter under her breath, "This is what happens when we start making exceptions for every sob story." Mia's face crumpled. "I'm sorry I'm making trouble, Daddy," she whispered. I leaned in close, pulling her into a gentle hug. "You are never trouble," I said fiercely. "Never. Some people just forget how to be kind." That moment could have ended there, tucked away as just another painful memory in a growing list of indignities, filed under things we survived. But life had other plans. Because 3 days later, everything changed. The Meadowbrook Estates summer picnic was the crown jewel of neighborhood events, a tradition that predated most of the residents who now eagerly RSVP'd to the glossy invitations. The welcome packet we received when we moved in had boasted about it. Live music, catered food, games for the kids, and a chance to strengthen community bonds. It was supposed to be a celebration of unity, of neighbors coming together in joy. But for us, it was a question mark. After the ice cream incident, Mia grew anxious about being around people. She worried someone would laugh at her or call her a problem again. I told her we could skip it, but her physical therapist said these kinds of events were important for her confidence and social development. I didn't want one bitter woman to cut my daughter off from the rest of the world. "We'll just stay for an hour," I promised, as I gently lifted Mia from the car and into her wheelchair. "If you're not having fun, we'll leave right away." The community center lawn had been transformed. Twinkling lights hung from white tents, colorful balloons bobbed in the breeze, and a buffet table stretched along the patio with silver trays steaming with delicious food. Kids ran laughing toward the playground, while adults sipped wine from plastic cups and shared potluck casseroles and baked treats. For a moment, it almost looked like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. "Dad, look!" Mia pointed excitedly. "They have a table I can reach." Sure enough, tucked near the garden was a table built low enough for someone in a wheelchair to access comfortably. My heart lifted. Maybe, just maybe, not everyone in Meadowbrook agreed with Patricia's tyrannical views. We joined the buffet line, and I helped Mia select a plate of soft pasta, fruit slices, and a generous piece of chocolate cake. She grinned, her eyes lighting up with rare excitement. We found our way to the accessible table and settled in. For the first time since moving, I saw my daughter relax. Then the microphone crackled. Patricia Harrington took center stage, dressed in a tailored blue sheath that perfectly matched the HOA logo and a gleaming name tag that read, President. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice magnified across the lawn, "to our 27th annual Meadowbrook Estates summer picnic." There was polite applause as conversations dimmed and all eyes turned to her. What followed was not a welcome speech. It was a veiled attack. 15 minutes of carefully crafted reminders about community standards that just so happened to target every accommodation we had requested since our arrival. All home modifications, including ramps, must be submitted for approval. Vehicles with specialized equipment must comply with parking regulations. And above all, parents are responsible for ensuring their children do not create messes in shared spaces. I felt heat rise in my chest as several neighbors subtly glanced our way. Mia's face darkened. The joy in her eyes dimmed like a flame snuffed out by wind. When Patricia finally handed off the mic, a woman with curly red hair approached us. She wore a warm smile and carried an air of reassurance. "Don't let her get to you," she said gently. "The rest of us aren't like that." "I'm Diana Carson. We live 3 doors down." "James Reed," I said, offering a hand. "And this is Mia." Diana pulled up a chair and drew Mia into a conversation about books. Soon, her daughter Lily joined us and invited Mia to join her for the Firefly release planned for sunset. It was the first moment of genuine connection we'd experienced in weeks. As the girls chatted, Diana leaned toward me, Some of us on the neighborhood committee have concerns about Patricia's leadership. If you've experienced anything inappropriate, I'd like to hear about it." I hesitated. Speaking out could make us even more of a target. But before I could answer, I noticed Mia's plate was empty. "I'll get you some more cake, sweetie," I said, rising from my seat. "I'll watch her," Diana offered, and I nodded in thanks. At the dessert table, I waited behind a group of chatting residents when I overheard Patricia's voice, sharp and venomous. "It's completely inappropriate. If we keep making exceptions for every disability request, property values will drop. Then what? Group homes? Halfway houses?" A man responded, clearly uncomfortable. "We're talking about a little girl, Patricia. She just needs some accommodations." "Disabled is just code for special treatment," she snapped. "My kids didn't need special tables or ramps to behave properly." I gripped the plate tighter, my knuckles white around the slice of cake. Every word she spoke was poison, and I knew deep down this was more than just a personal vendetta. Patricia wasn't going to stop. But what she didn't know was that neither would I. I returned to the table, balancing a fresh slice of chocolate cake, expecting to see Mia still chatting with Lily, or maybe coloring on the paper tablecloth, like she often did when she felt safe. But instead, Diana was gone. In her place stood Patricia Harrington, arms folded, lips curled in a smirk that never reached her eyes. And sitting in front of my daughter was a different plate, one I hadn't prepared. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "What's going on?" I asked sharply, setting down the cake. My eyes immediately locked onto the plate in front of Mia. What lay there wasn't food, it was filth. An unappetizing, revolting mix of what looked like discarded food scraps. Half-eaten pasta, a slice of soggy bread smeared with something unidentifiable, fruit rinds, even what looked like a cigarette butt, nestled among the pile like a cruel garnish. My daughter stared at it in frozen horror, tears silently trailing down her cheeks. Patricia didn't flinch. If anything, her smugness deepened. "Just ensuring community standards are upheld, Mr. Reed," she said coolly, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve. "Diana was called away by the entertainment committee, and I noticed your daughter making quite a mess with her food." She gestured dismissively toward a napkin on the table, as if a few crumbs and a smudge of pasta sauce were justification for what she had done. So I took the liberty of offering her something more appropriate for a child who clearly hasn't learned proper table etiquette. I could barely hear over the sound of blood rushing in my ears, but I caught her next words as if they were etched in stone. "Children with special needs should be grateful for any food they receive. In this community, we don't waste resources on those who can't appreciate them properly." Mia's lip quivered. Her hands, already weak from her condition, were clutched tightly in her lap, her shoulders shaking from silent sobs. The humiliation was overwhelming. And the worst part, she hadn't done anything wrong. Nothing to deserve this. Before I could speak, before I could let the full force of my rage break loose, Diana returned. She paused mid-step, her eyes dropping to the plate, then snapping back up to Patricia with a look of horror that quickly twisted into fury. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice low and sharp. "A lesson in gratitude," Patricia replied, sounding almost bored. "This child wasted a perfectly good meal by spilling it everywhere, so I provided something more suited to her capabilities." Diana's eyes widened in disbelief. Then, without a word, she picked up the offensive plate, holding it high above her head like a blazing torch. "Everyone," she called out, loud and clear, her voice carrying over the picnic chatter, slicing through it like thunder. "I need your attention. Right now." Conversation stopped, heads turned. A hush fell over the crowd as everyone turned toward us. I felt a wave of dread, a fear that this would only deepen the embarrassment for Mia. But what came next was not shame. It was justice. This plate, Diana announced, her voice shaking, was given to a 7-year-old disabled child by our HOA president. It contains garbage, literal garbage, scraps from other people's plates, food with dirt on it, possibly ashes, and she told this little girl that this— she held the plate higher, disgust evident in every movement— was appropriate for someone like her, that she should be grateful for it. Gasps rose like a wave. Murmurs spread like wildfire. People looked from the plate to Patricia, to Mia, then back again. Parents pulled their children close, eyes wide with disbelief. The mask Patricia wore, the one of polished authority and power, began to crack. "That's not what happened," Patricia stammered, but her voice had lost its edge. "I was merely teaching appropriate—" "I heard every word," an elderly man from the next table interrupted, rising to his feet, face red with indignation. "Disgraceful. Utterly disgraceful." From the crowd, another figure stepped forward, tall, stern, wearing a name tag that read, Robert Chen, Vice President. "Is this true, Patricia? Did you serve discarded food to a child? A disabled child?" Her composure splintered. She sputtered, searching for a thread to hold on to. "It was a teaching moment. This family, since they arrived, they've been nothing but trouble. They expect special treatment. They think they're above the rules. Someone had to show them that Meadowbrook has standards. By forcing a little girl to eat garbage." A woman with silver hair, standing beside her teenage grandson, looked like she might be sick. "That's not enforcing rules. That's abuse." And just like that, the crowd turned. The illusion Patricia had spent years crafting of order, elegance, control, collapsed under the weight of her own cruelty. Robert stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling for an emergency board meeting. Right now, right here." Suddenly, people who had always stayed silent began to speak. One by one, neighbors stepped forward with stories of their own. An elderly couple mentioned how Patricia fined them for putting up a handrail for safety. A young mother shared how her child was denied access to the playground due to noise complaints filed by Patricia. A man who used a walker admitted he had stopped attending HOA meetings because he couldn't reach the room Patricia insisted on using. The floodgates had opened. Throughout it all, I knelt beside Mia, shielding her from the stairs as best I could. But this time, the looks weren't ones of pity or discomfort. They were of outrage and support. Diana sat with us, her daughter Lily gently placing a fresh slice of cake in front of Mia, untouched and perfect, a gesture so pure that it brought tears to my eyes. Mia looked at it, then at Lily, and a small, hesitant smile crossed her tear-streaked face. "I'm so sorry," Diana whispered to me, eyes shining. "We've let this go on for too long. We were all afraid of becoming her next target, but not anymore." Robert returned minutes later, standing tall and solemn. "Patricia Harrington," he said, voice loud and clear, "you are hereby suspended from the HOA board, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. This community will no longer tolerate behavior that goes against our shared values of dignity and inclusion." Patricia's jaw dropped. She stood frozen, then abruptly turned on her heel and marched away, her voice trailing behind her with threats of lawsuits and warnings about collapsing property values. But no one followed her. No one defended her. And for the first time since we'd moved into Meadowbrook Estates, I saw what real community looked like. Not the polished facade, not the forced smiles, but real unity. Neighbors rising to stand with what was right, instead of what was easy. And all of it began with a little girl, a filthy plate, and the unwavering refusal to be silent in the face of cruelty. Patricia's departure from the picnic was nothing short of dramatic, heels pounding against the pavement, sharp words flying about lawsuits, community collapse, and how the riffraff would now run the neighborhood. But nobody chased after her. Nobody came to her defense. Instead, neighbors stood quietly, some still holding plates of food forgotten in their hands, watching her retreat like a queen deposed in the middle of her own coronation. The tension that had wrapped around Meadowbrook Estates for years like a vine choking the roots of a tree began to loosen. It didn't snap all at once. It uncoiled slowly as people turned toward each other, some for the first time, realizing just how long they had allowed themselves to live in fear of a woman whose power came from intimidation, not integrity. That same night, an impromptu board meeting was held beneath the string lights that still shimmered across the lawn. Robert Chen, the vice president of the HOA, took charge with a calm authority that felt foreign after so long under Patricia's thumb. Residents sat at picnic tables and folding chairs, no longer just guests at a social event, but participants in something far more meaningful, a reckoning. Testimonies poured in. People who had never spoken up before because they thought their experiences were isolated or because they feared retaliation, finally voiced their grievances. There were stories of fines issued for minor landscaping choices, of playground access denied under the guise of noise complaints, of accessibility requests delayed or denied outright. One elderly woman with a cane told how she'd been cited for placing a second handrail on her porch stairs. A young couple described being threatened with legal action for hosting a Bible study in their own backyard. What united them all was the realization that Patricia's control had thrived not through policy, but through silence. Through it all, I sat beside Mia, who clung to my hand but watched everything with wide, alert eyes. Her body still trembled faintly, the aftermath of humiliation clinging to her like a shadow. But Lily never left her side, and neither did Diana. And somewhere amid the chaos, something shifted, not just for Mia, but for the entire community. We weren't outsiders anymore. We weren't exceptions to be tolerated. We had become the catalyst for a neighborhood to rediscover its conscience. In the days that followed, I saw change unfold like spring after a bitter winter. Neighbors I'd barely exchanged waves with now stopped by our yard to talk. A man named Jorge from across the street showed up with a tool belt, offering to help install additional safety railings around Mia's ramp. A retired teacher offered tutoring help. Someone anonymously dropped off a brand new adaptive art kit on our porch. The HOA board moved swiftly. Within a week, they not only approved every single accessibility modification I had previously submitted, they also reviewed every fine Patricia had ever issued. More than half were overturned, and several residents were refunded. But the biggest surprise came when I received an envelope in the mail, hand-delivered, stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a formal apology, signed by the entire board, and a request for me to attend the next board meeting as a community witness. 2 weeks after the picnic, a moving truck appeared outside Patricia's pristine colonial-style house. Curtains fluttered as residents peeked out to watch. No one approached to help. No one came to say goodbye. It was as if the spell she had cast over Meadowbrook had finally broken, and what remained was only silence. But I knew it wasn't over yet. The HOA had launched a full internal investigation, and what they found was worse than anyone had expected. Financial audits revealed that Patricia had been selectively enforcing regulations in a way that disproportionately impacted residents with disabilities, minorities, and the elderly. Fines had been issued unfairly, requests ignored or lost. Meanwhile, her close circle of friends had enjoyed rule exemptions, backyard structures, decorative fences, even unauthorized pool installations, all overlooked or quietly approved. What had started as one act of cruelty against a child had unveiled a pattern of abuse stretching back years. I attended the final board hearing, held in the town hall, where Diana Carson officially took over as the new HOA president. Watching her speak, poised, compassionate, and driven, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Trust, Her first action as president was to propose the formation of an Inclusion and Accessibility Committee, tasked with ensuring Meadowbrook was not just livable, but welcoming for every resident, regardless of age, ability, or background. The motion passed unanimously, and with that, a new chapter began. 6 months later, Meadowbrook Estates hosted its first ever Accessibility Awareness Fair, and this time, the spotlight wasn't on rules or regulations. It was on connection, on empathy. Mia was invited to help lead several of the interactive booths. She demonstrated how navigating a world built for others felt for someone in a wheelchair. She showed children how to use adaptive tools for drawing and writing. She told her story, gently in her soft voice, about how kindness could change everything. Watching her speak in front of a group of smiling kids, explaining with pride how her wheelchair gave her freedom, not limitation, was one of the proudest moments of my life. That night, after all the guests had gone home, after the tables were packed away and the lights dimmed, I tucked Mia into bed. She looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked a question I didn't expect. "Daddy, do you think Miss Patricia ever understood why she was wrong?" I paused, thought about it, all the damage Patricia had caused, all the people she had hurt. I thought about the plate of garbage, the smirk on her face, the silence from the community that used to follow her out of fear. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. "Sometimes people get so focused on rules and appearances, they forget how to be human." Mia nodded thoughtfully, fiddling with the edge of her blanket. "I'm glad we didn't move away," she said after a moment. "If we had, maybe things wouldn't have changed. And the next kid like me, maybe they would have been treated bad too." I swallowed hard, kissed her forehead, and turned out the light. She didn't know it, but her words hit deeper than anything else. She had seen the worst in people, and still found the courage to believe in the good. Patricia Harrington had meant to shame Mia with that plate of filth. She had meant to diminish her, humiliate her, push her family out of the neighborhood. But all she did was spark a fire, one that lit up an entire community. What was meant to isolate us instead united dozens. What was meant to silence my daughter instead gave her a voice that now echoed through every corner of Meadowbrook Estates as a quiet but powerful reminder. Kindness isn't a luxury, it's the standard. And the measure of any community, of any heart, is how it treats those with the least power. That lesson didn't come from a board meeting or a policy change. It came from a little girl, sitting bravely at a table, staring down cruelty and changing the world around her. One moment, one smile, one act of quiet courage at a time.